nothing has made me more excited than painting. Nothing has made me more depressed than painting, right? There's nothing that has torn my life to shreds as much as painting has. There's nothing that's put me together nearly as completely as painting. And so I know that I made the right decision for myself.
The artist journey is unclear. Becoming an artist does not come with an instruction manual. So how do we all pull this off? I've been asking myself and others this question for years. It is in fact why I started this podcast. I'm finding out there are a million different answers depending on who you're asking. But today, my conversation with the brilliant New York-based painter Rob Szot offers some of the most refreshingly simple answers to this gigantic question. After I hung up the phone at the end of our conversation, I wrote one sentence down in my sketchbook and underlined it. I wrote, "All the information needed to create my art will be provided by making my art." Have a listen to the wisdom and clarity of Rob Szot, an artist smack dab in the middle of his purpose and the making of his extraordinary art and life. Rob joins me from his new LA-based studio midwinter on a beautiful sunny day. Welcome to Art2Life, a podcast for the creatively curious. My name is Nicholas Wilton, and each week I'll help you rediscover not just the art of your life, but the art in your life. Join me as we explore that perfect blue at twilight, the wild frontiers of art making, and the extraordinary joy of finding your way as you go. Thanks so much for jumping on today and having this conversation. Super appreciate it.
Of course. And listen, I have to tell you, the last time I sat down with your organization a few years ago with Susan Melrath over at the Anita Rogers Gallery, as soon as that interview went live, I was inundated with messages from people that have taken your course at Art2Life, and their stories and how they interacted with me was really inspired me. And I just think what you're doing over there is really great, Nicholas. I mean, it seems to be helping artists no matter what point of their career that they're in, and I just think it's really terrific.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, that interview, members of the Academy can watch. I looked at it, I remembered it, and I went and rewatched it, and it was great. It was such a good interview, and that's, it was sort of a jumping off point. I wanted to go deeper, and I kept thinking about it over the last year or so, and so that was what prompted me to reach out to you, because and we can kind of give a quick background, but just your journey, which is what this podcast is about, you literally finding your way as you go, not having gone to art school. I mean, I love that. And just, you're just the student of yourself, and more than most people, and that's what's so inspiring. I know not everyone, probably most people know your work, but just, I know you moved to New York. Give us a quick background just so we can get everyone on the same page.
Sure. I'm from the East Coast originally. I was born in New Jersey, but left there really young, and ended up in Houston, where I grew up. And my childhood was very good. I mean, not tumultuous at all, but not the most interesting place to grow up. I mean, the suburbs of Houston they're very nice, and they're very manicured and well put together. But I didn't really feel like I got too much input in terms of the art world, or what I imagine people would deem sort of a higher culture. When I first started going into downtown Houston, to the Menil and to the Modern Art Museum down there, it's really my first exposure to art as a teenager. And right around the age of 25, after going to college in Austin at the University of Texas, I decided that I was going to move to New York City to become a painter, which I had virtually no experience with, and I had never sold a painting or never had an exhibition, or as you mentioned, never had any training in art school. It was just this kind of wild fantasy that I had, that I'm the type of person that has always felt like I could do anything. And I think that kind of naivety and mixed with a little bit of ambition got me to New York City at 25, and started my art career in earnest. So,
God, that's just I mean, I really get that. Sometimes, I don't know, we have this sort of ignorance that we don't put limitations around what's possible for ourselves, it's amazing. Like we can actually do so much more than we think. I mean, that's amazing.
I think that's true. I think also you need to allow yourself to open up to the idea of always learning. I do this, I think, primarily because I'm not really looking for an answer. I'm not looking for a solution to these problems that I'm essentially creating for myself. I prefer to just run these things down for the rest of my life. And if I never really find a real answer or a permanent solution to any of this, I'm perfectly satisfied just chasing it for as long as I'm here. So.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you've established kind of a way of doing this, a process that, it's obviously sustainable and you're engaged in learning. But surely when you began, I mean, for myself, it was just such a roller coaster, such an emotional up and down. And I mean, I cannot imagine not having a lot of confirmation about art and then going into a room in New York City and just doing that by yourself. Like, what was that like? Was it rocky, or how did you frame it for yourself so you could keep doing it?
The great thing about painting for me is that it allows me to express who I am as an individual in a different way. And what I mean by that is that I don't necessarily have to be present in a room for my work to speak to who I am. And that really appeals to me. Not that I don't enjoy meeting people, not that I don't enjoy, shaking hands and talking to people about my work. I'm certainly up for that. But I think having a secondary representation of who I am and like sort of my innermost being displayed in a tangible form is a much more comfortable thing for me. So when you talk about going into a room and sort of being there for the first time and not having a real understanding of, what the art world is like, what being an artist is about, especially on a stage like New York City, I feel like if I'm there with my paintings and my paintings are accurate representations of what I was trying to achieve, I feel like I've got a bit of backup. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have to go into any sort of in-depth explanation. I don't have to justify a certain composition or certain color choices. I feel like that painting is there speaking for me. And so I feel like, I've got a little bit of backup in the room. And so I think that gave me a lot of confidence moving forward. And listen, I've been very fortunate. I've had great galleries represent my work. I've had certainly my share of cheerleaders. I've had my share of critics as well, but there's been enough of a balance where I didn't feel like the ship was tipping one way or the other, right? Like I didn't fully believe in what I was doing enough to sort of get lazy and complacent about it. And I didn't not believe so much in the work because of all the criticism that I was getting that I just wanted to quit. I've had a pretty balanced uphill. It's been an uphill climb, certainly, but I feel like it's been balanced and definitely manageable in terms of keeping my more outrageous emotions in check. I mean, we all put our foot through a canvas occasionally. We all threaten to quit and go work at McDonald's, and I have those moments weekly. But fortunately, I've had a lot of good luck in my career. So
yeah, and the way I get what you're saying, because I sort of feel like your art and you surround yourself with a bunch of supporters, which is your art, and you just sort of point to those things and it takes the pressure off. I mean, I remember public speaking for me was much, much easier if I had a slideshow because I could just kind of look up at the screen and point at something and talk about it. There was another, it was kind of like take the focus off myself a little bit. So.
I feel like that's super accurate because I think if I were to be very honest with people, I think one of my overriding qualities, characteristics of my personality is I'm kind of a shy person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I gravitated toward making paintings because, again, I felt like it was just a different way and an important way for me to express who I was as a person without kind of fumbling over my own words, without kind of getting my own insecurities kind of ahead of me and tripping over them in conversation. And so having those paintings there and having them just hung on a wall and be a very tangible thing to look at, I think it provides strangely a lot of comfort for me.
Yeah, and it marks your progress. I mean,
sure.
Probably that first afternoon you got that studio 20 years ago or whatever, and it's pretty hard. And then you make something, and then you make another thing, and pretty soon, well, clearly I'm doing something. There's these things on the wall, and and then you just kind of like build that. But it's just creating your own momentum. I mean, there's no career really. I guess writing for sure, but it's just so self-propelled, especially in the beginning.
Well, you have to stay ambitious, certainly. Even when the phone stops ringing and there's seemingly nobody interested in your work, it is vitally important that you got to find the real reason that you're doing these things. And the real reason is you're trying to have purpose for your life. You're trying to create purpose for your life. And sometimes, again, the phone is going to go silent and you've got to get through those things. That still happens to me 20 years on. There are low points in my career even now, and you really have to get used to working through those low points. And there's really no other way of becoming an artist, in my opinion. It becomes this thing that you have to do daily, despite whatever circumstance you're in.
Yeah, there's a degree of bravery in this that, it's just showing yourself. And I love how you're talking about, I'm trying to find purpose. And because it really is in art, in your journey, you don't entirely know where you're going necessarily.
Yeah,
and it's like, it would make sense if it's a lot easier if maybe you're trying to be a doctor to come up with or a scientist to come up with a cure to, a vaccine or something.
Sure, something with a rule book, right?
It's like something, nice, but I love that idea that you're trying to find purpose. And I was reading this book this morning with, it was Glennon Doyle, but she wrote this idea. She said, brave means living from the inside out. I don't know. I just underlined that. I thought that was so good, because that's what we're doing in a way, with art. It's like pulling this stuff out of ourselves. And that's your life. Like, how does this relate? How does your life integrate to your art? I get the sense that they're the same with you. I mean, It's what I've really tried. It's what I've really tried to take down any barrier. And I know it's a very esoteric thing to talk about, but I wanted to remove the barrier between who I was and who I am as a person and the work that I'm producing. And to me, there's really only one way to accomplish that. And that is to never really break the dialogue you're having with your work. And in order to continue that dialogue and to continue the conversation you're having with what you're doing, you have to be in the studio really every day. And I'm not saying that you go to work and you paint every day. I'm just saying that you have to be present and living amongst that work to eventually break that barrier down. And it's a tremendous amount of effort, and it's a tremendous amount of editing, and it's a tremendous amount of solitude, and you're really just in it for yourself, and you're in it every day, and it will affect your social life. It will affect your finances. It will literally touch everything, right? But in the end, I think once you feel like you're able to kind of transmute what's inside of you onto that canvas, I think it does a few things that are really important. One, you have an endless well of work inside of you that is ready to come out. Now, again, you may not feel like you want to go to work every day and get it done, but it's in there, and you don't need to rely on things like inspiration. People talk about inspiration, where do you get it and how do you find it? But I think once you're able to dialogue with your work properly every day and really your work becomes who you are, I don't think inspiration is, it's not necessary. And I think the other thing that it accomplishes is that your work changes with your life. And so as you get older and your circumstances change and you move to Los Angeles, for example, I think it is naturally reflected in your work. And then your work is never the same. It has the string of authorship running through it, which is super important, but it's always slightly different. It's always more developed. It's always interesting. It's because your life is changing and your work is changing as a consequence. Yeah, no, that's great. And, people often ask that question about, what inspires, and, you talk about presence, like staying in it. And right. And I think of that as, it's like there's just the juice. There's an energy that you can find in your work. But the thread, at least for me, I can see it and feel it. Sometimes I feel it, I can feel it in this conversation a little bit. I feel the energy of oh yeah, that's that thing that I do, like, I'll see it, outside when I'm running, I'll see something or hear something or see a color but it's a choice to, it's like the Shakti, it's like the energy. It's a choice to move into that place. And you're, I think you're right on with, like, there's no shortage of inspiration. It
Right.
generates from this conversation that you're having with yourself.
And I think you'll get to a point if you're working on something at the studio, it's difficult to go home at the end of the day, right? Like you end up going home and then you're literally thinking about that painting that you're working on at the studio. It's got a draw to it that I really have a difficult time explaining, but I end up finding myself getting back in the car and like going back to the studio to work because I just cannot get it out of my head. And it's that kind of connection that I honestly, it took me 20 years to get there. It really did. And through very hard times and through some very, questionable, I had a tremendous amount of doubt over the last 20 years, but nothing has made me more excited than painting. Nothing has made me more depressed than painting, right? There's nothing that has torn my life to shreds as much as painting has. There's nothing that's put me together nearly as completely as painting. And so I know that I made the right decision for myself and all the sacrifice and hard work. And it doesn't really mean much of anything, it doesn't mean anything because like you're in it. And it's you can probably tell, like I get a little goofy when I talk about it because I'm still so excited about it. Like I'm like a kid, really.
Yeah,
honestly,
no, totally. But it's difficult too, I love what Hemingway said about, write clean and hard about what hurts. And I think I get that. Like, what's your relationship with this work? Like, it's like a marriage where you're fighting and then you're making love. And, like, is it like that? It feels like it's hard too, right?
It's funny because a lot of people will ask me, oh, do you like that painting or do you like this work on paper? And the reality is like, I know what my relationship with that painting was. And it was probably a very tenuous one where there was a lot of screaming and self-deprecation. And I had to fight to get it to a point where I felt that it was finished. So my relationship with that painting is not great. Like I don't have good feelings when I see that painting, but I think that's exactly why I love it. Like I love New York City for the same reasons, right? Like it was a perfect incubator to be an artist, New York, because it's a difficult place to live. It's expensive. It's inconvenient. It's just a hard place to make a living. But it's so hard that you end up becoming a part of the fabric of New York City and that you can't live without it and that you think about it all the time. And you're just so happy to be in New York. And it's the same way with painting for me. It's difficult, but I don't want my life to necessarily be easy in that respect, right? I want to feel the challenge of expressing myself in a different way, in a new way, even after 20 years. Like I want it to be new because I got to be honest with you, Nicholas, like the thing I worry about the most, like my primary motivation is I bore so easily. And the first thing I get bored with is myself. And so if it's not hard or if I'm not challenging myself, or if I look at a painting and I'm like, oh, I did that like 300 times already, I put those same colors together, a year ago. I want it to be challenging. Otherwise, I guess I can go get an office job somewhere where I could, and then look, no offense to people that work in an office. Like if that's your thing, then that's great. But for me, I just have to be, in the middle of everything over there.
What's kind of amazing to me is that you're really sourcing a majority of your entire existence from this art. Like,
right.
I have to, what helps me a lot is like, I'll go away for a week, and I get the sense that you don't take breaks so much. No, and like, how do you maintain, like, that's pretty impressive.
I feel bad for my girlfriend. She hasn't had a vacation in 10 years. Like, I don't take breaks. I just don't. You know why? It's because it's almost like an embarrassment of riches for me. I always wanted to have a Tuesday to myself to be in the studio and to be painting. And the moment I was able to achieve a clear schedule where I was supporting myself with my art, it felt like every day was a holiday for me, that every day felt like a vacation because my days were my own. And that's a very special thing to have. I know it almost sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but having that time to yourself and making those decisions every day about what it is I'm going to do with my life and having that freedom, it felt like a vacation. And so I feel like I'm spoiled in that sense. So leaving the studio and not being at work, I almost feel guilty if I take a day off. And so I just don't. I just don't.
That is so impressive. I mean, yeah, wow. So just, I'm always curious because I love process, but I mean, you get up at 10. I mean, what are you going at 9 and work till 5 and then go? I mean, you have other people in your life, right? I mean, when does the girlfriend see you? Okay. I'm gonna, throw something for her here. When does she get to see you? How does this work?
Fortunately, she has her own business, so she's very busy herself, and we have this setup now where we have an understanding that we have what we like to call our separate lives together, right? So we have our things that we go off and we do during the day, and then we come together in the evening, and we support each other a great deal, and we have each other's backs, certainly. But we both understand that work has to be done. She's a very ambitious person herself. She's very driven in her own business, and she does very well with it. And so she allows me to do what I need to do. She actually went to art school, Nicholas, which is, I don't know if that's irony or what, but she went to painting school, and she is certainly not shy about having open discussions about, this painting I've done, or maybe I should change that, and, this and that. But I typically get to the studio about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm home by 6 or 6:30.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very busy year for me this year. I've got 5 exhibitions scheduled, all in major markets, starting at the end of this month. And I think there's going to be a lot of studio time between now and the end of the year. So yeah. I'm sure she's quite prepared for it. I think I've complained about it enough to her, so she knows what's coming up. So. And
is that, when you're working, do you stand up and work against the wall? I mean, how physical is it? Because that's a lot of hours.
Yeah, I'm on my feet all day. Mm-hmm. I really am. I mean, I stretch the canvases. It's linen on. You ever use aluminum stretcher bars before?
I have not, but I hear they're just absolutely pristine in terms of dimensions. Okay.
They're so great.
Okay, this is the link that whoever made it this long in the interview, we're gonna provide a link for this. So who's the source? Who do you use? Or I'll add it to the links. So
I get my art supplies from Soho Art Materials in Manhattan, and they make their own aluminum stretcher bars there. And I'm a material snob, I have to say. Like, I love the best materials I can get. Simply because I don't want to sell somebody something that was cheaply made. I feel a little guilty about that, So these aluminum stretcher bars are, they're everything you've heard that they are. They're really great. I love them.
Wow. And so if someone buys a painting, just curious, because I've run into this, well, let's say they live in Australia, can you roll it and then put the aluminum stretcher bars in a tube, or how does that work? I mean,
I typically just send the painting and they'll have it restretched. I mean, the aluminum stretcher bars they're the same dimensions as say like an OBG wood stretcher would be. There's nothing unusual about the dimensions that wouldn't work just as well with a set of wooden stretchers. I'm just, unfortunately, terribly addicted to expensive materials now. And so that's just something I go to because, I mean, Nicholas, I'll be honest with you. There are times when I'll get a roll of lead prime linen delivered to the studio, and I'll just wrap my arms around it and just hug it like it's my child that's come home from, the war or something terrible like that. I love to be around it. I love the materials. I love the process. I mean, I'm trying not to sound like some goofy person, but I'm just, I'm in it. It's great.
Yeah, that's so great. So you're painting with oil?
Yeah, I do oil and charcoal on linen. The linen I use is it's a medium tooth Belgian linen that I also get from Soho Art Materials. It's SKU numbers 5281 if anybody wants to get a hold of it.
Cool. And I'll put a link to that.
Okay. And I used to do a very luxurious form of that linen, it was a rabbit skin glue size, double lead prime. And it just got too pricey. It just got to be a little too expensive. So now I end up just priming the stuff myself in the studio. But I've worked with linens now for the last, I would say, probably 12 years. And the surface, the way that I integrate the actual weave of the linen into the composition of the painting, because I use very thin oil paints. I typically just kind of use glazes that are layered one on top of another. And then I'll end up kind of taking that top layer down enough to where you can see the grain of the linen itself. So it becomes this extra depth to it, you know.
Yeah, I'm sort of impressed with that. I tend to paint in layers and thick, but like I always loved Diebenkorn, you know, those large paintings, those Ocean Park paintings, and
Sure.
it's pretty thin, but it's opaque, but it's thin, and the line work, and you're pulling that off. When I do it tends to, I just feel like I haven't finished it, you know, but you're getting that quality. Not sure.
You and I, we have a similar process in the sense that and I've watched a lot of your videos on social media, watching you paint. You and I are very similar in our love for the big reveal, right? Like you always get back to the underpaint after you put a layer of paint on top of it. Like you end up scraping it away in a much more physical manner than I do. And I think that's because of the thickness of the paint that you work in. But I think there's something really great about your use of concealment and revelation. And I tend to take advantage of that as well. I feel like, and I've seen it in your work as well, like it offers a little bit of a surprise to the viewers. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I like your work, Nicholas, a lot, because the thing I like about painting the most and seeing other people's painting is I like to see the work that's gone into it, right? I like to see the process. I like to see, he made this move here because clearly he was thinking along these lines. I like to see the thoughts that go behind the work. And I think that your work is really rife with that. Like there's a real craftsmanship to what you do. And it's certainly something that I appreciate in your painting and as well as other people's work.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I mean, I think, yes, surprise the viewer, but really it's for me, like that's right, what keeps me in it. It just the wonder of what's happening. I mean, I very much am similar in that way where I don't know what's going to happen, or I love that condition, totally. I think that's so amazing. Now, when you do those, when you stretch the linen on the aluminum, so there's no hard surface behind your panel or behind your canvas, right?
No, I've done paintings where I've mounted linen onto panels, and they do take on a different look just because I feel like I can be a lot more aggressive in my editing on a panel because, there's not so much give when you push on the canvas. But lately, it's just been stretched canvas. Yeah. So I have to be a little bit careful because I do tend to kind of like physically push the canvas a little hard. And sometimes you end up with that silly little crossbar line back there. And you got, you just got to kind of, So it is something I have to be mindful of because I do tend to lose myself a little bit when I'm working. And I don't consider these things, while I'm doing them. But it has been a problem in the past. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. When I put my canvas on top of a hardwood panel, and then I take it off, and then I have it put on stretcher bars. So,
I didn't know that. Yeah. You take it off the panel itself. Okay.
Yeah. So I have all these panels in the studio so when I get my canvas, I just a stretcher bar. I mean, I put it on a panel, the canvas, and then I paint it, and then it's really great because as soon as the painting leaves, I don't have to wait. There's the size again. I got a 60 by 60 or whatever. Right. So it's pretty good. It's much faster. I used to just do work on panels, and they would warp, and they're super, super heavy. And so
sure, yeah, the weight is a real problem with that. And when you start doing panels, like especially like cradle panels and stuff like that. Do you have any residual memories of like old panels that you look at and go, "Oh, I remember like where that painting went," or "I remember what that painting looked like"? And does that affect, like, let's say you have a panel that you've used 3 or 4 times that probably has a little paint on the outer edges, I assume, right? Or around the sides of it. Like, does that bring up any kind of memories for you? And then does that guide you in any way whenever you're working?
Well, there is a thing, and I can show you a photo of it. It's pretty cool. What happens is when I start the painting on the canvas, the paint goes through the canvas and it colors the board. It's weird. It's like a shadow of the canvas. And then I take the canvas off, and then there's the panel, but it's got these marks on it from before. And each time I take the canvas off and I'm about to put a new canvas on, there's all these marks that are appearing. And it's the one that's in the studio right now. It's like, I haven't covered it up because it's like, oh, that's getting really good. You know, I don't know. But
that's great, man.
Yeah,
that's great.
I definitely, when I was, you know, these panels that I make, I've got one that I haven't been very attentive about archival. I'm much more, you know what, if this, you know, well, I'm not even going to be here. And, you know, a lot of my paintings fall apart a little bit. And I have got one that keeps coming back. And I mean, I'm just, you know, scotch taping it back together, you know. So there's one or two paintings that I service because I really hadn't gotten my materials down when I started and things were not gluing well together. So I get to see my work. And then, you know, and then if a painting doesn't sell, the gallery eventually will send it back. And then it's like, I look on the back of the thing and I've crossed out titles. It's like, oh my God, I've done 3 paintings on this one, you know?
You sound a lot like me, Nicholas. Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, there are paintings out in the world right now. Like, I know where they're at, or at least I know who I sold them to. And I'd love to get those things back and just, I don't know, put them in a fire somewhere, just burn them up. You know, I mean, I'll replace it, like whatever you want, but like, that early work, and I can't imagine having to come back and just think, oh my God, like what was I thinking 10 years ago? I have no idea.
Oh, I know. I know.
That's the consequence of, again, like breaking down that barrier of who you are and what your paintings are, because you've moved on 10 years from this work and you're not the same person.
No.
And look, I'm not saying they're bad paintings. I mean, maybe to me they're a little uncomfortable, but I think it's because I look at it and think I'm just not that person anymore, you know? And like, it's that kind of thing.
Totally. And I noticed that there's a phase with these paintings. Like if you look at a painting that I've made, you know, 2 years ago, like I don't, or fairly within 5 or 6 years, I mean, it's like, please don't show this. It's horrible. But the ones that are really old, I'm so glad I have a couple because I've sort of fallen in love with them again. They're just so pathetic, but kind of like, but I'm okay with, like, I like them, you know, they're like children or something, you know, and I have a few of those.
Don't beat yourself up for the weird times in your life, Nicholas. That's what I tell people, you know what I mean? So I'm sure there are paintings in the attic of my parents' house that are just, you know, when I started painting, like my thing was I wanted to be Mark Rothko. And so my education as a painter was a book somebody bought me on Mark Rothko's work for my birthday. And I didn't know who this person was. I had no clue. But here I was faced with like some being that made this transcendental work with such a small vocabulary, right? Just a square, you know? And it's just like, my God, like he's saying so much in like this little sort of nondescript, you know, floating cloud. And I thought that's me, man. That's who I want to be.
I'll do that.
So the next, I'll do that. That's the name of my next book, Nicholas. I'll do that. So next year, I mean, it was just a bunch of really very poorly copied Rothko paintings, and I'm sure they still exist, and I think my parents have them, and I don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm happy that they're around, but that's all right. We'll just keep those as mementos of an era gone by.
Yeah, no, totally. So, you know, I love your work. And I mean, and I do get it. Like there's a similar thing we're involved in, but I'm curious, like you put together, you know, line, shape, and color. Like, how do you think about these 3, you know, family members or whatever, you know, and then how are you putting them together? Like, do you think of them separately? Like I do, but how are you using those or thinking about them, or do you just not think about them?
It's funny because my girlfriend, who my partner, we've been together for a while. My partner, she went to art school, and the thing she says over and over again is like, Robert, I don't understand how you get that color to work with that color. Like these things traditionally aren't supposed to go together, and I think not having the benefit that art education I think they make sense to me. So I do it, right? And you asked me like what I think about it. And I think the reality is that I never really go into a painting thinking, well, it's going to be this dominant blue or it's going to have a lot of red in it. It really is a matter of the painting informing me as opposed to me informing the work. So what I'll do is day one on a canvas is my goal is to cover the entire canvas. Now, it's not this sort of willy-nilly paint throwing thing that I'm a little bit more thoughtful than that, but it certainly isn't something that I'm concentrating on thinking it's going to be the final product, right? Like what I'm trying to do is establish either interesting relationships or relationships that have a lot of conflict between the two of them, because I think to me that generates velocity in the work. And I'm trying to put this in a more understandable way. Like I get it, and I realize like saying it doesn't necessarily translate as well as I wanted to, but I want to cover the painting initially in an interesting way, but I know it's not in a complete way.
Yes.
Because I know that my editing process is where I'm the strongest as an artist. I'm a very fierce editor of my own work, and that I know means the dismantling and the destruction of even things on the canvas that I liked, right? So once that painting is covered on day one, day two typically is me looking at that work and then going back in and either making those relationships more complicated or making them more copacetic with each other. That's such a good question, Nicholas. I'm sorry, man. I feel like I'm kind of fumbling
but you're doing it. And I mean, this is exactly how I work. Yeah. So I'm tracking it. And I get it. It's like, it's not just like throw stuff on the canvas initially. It's like you're being thoughtful, but you're not white knuckling it. You're just putting things down, knowing that many things are going to change.
That there's nothing terribly precious or I don't, the thing you can't do is get attached to a small square on a canvas that you like. Now you could try to build off of that square, but listen, inevitably that thing is going to go to the wayside as well, because the canvas and the painting itself really tends to take a life of its own as you're working on it. And you cannot force it to accept something that was early on in the work. Like everything has to move as one, right? You don't want to end up with a painting that's like 3 or 4 paintings on one canvas. So the thing you have to keep in mind, I think for me at least, when you're working on a painting is that it is a singular object and it has to operate as a singular object. And so that space that you liked yesterday, if it's not working with everything else, I mean, it has to go or it has to change in some interesting way. And for me, the painting will get to a point, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 3 weeks in, I don't even know, that I will have overworked it so much that it will almost become a bit of a burden to me. Like I'll be a little bit bored with it. It's not exciting. I find myself kind of repeating the same techniques or repeating the same shapes, or I've done that color a million times. And literally I'll have to put the painting in some kind of jeopardy. Like I will literally deliberately do something that I would never do to a painting in order for me to push it over that hill and finish it in some interesting way. And so that could be like a big black line running through the center of it, like really forcing myself, like confronting myself with just an outrageous idea just to make the painting more interesting to me.
I totally get that.
And it's a super difficult thing to do, man, because you've been working on this thing probably for weeks, and you put all this time and all this money into it, and you want to get it done. Like, you cannot succumb to that desire to finish something, right? It has to be finished correctly or not at all. Because what's all that effort worth if you look at the painting and you think, God, it's just another Robert Szot painting, just boring, and I'm sick to death of it already. You know what I mean? I can't operate like that. So
I love what you just said. I've never really thought about it this way, but like the way you can finish, is almost like the way you started. Like you've got all this complexity, and I mean, I do the same thing. I've just like painted myself and it was just overdone. And then there's like this amazing, you cover up 2/3 of it and it's so simple and direct.
Right.
And then you've got like, there's the simple thinking, the bravery, the just sort of like boldness thinking with the neurotic, complicated, and they're balanced all of a sudden. And then it's like, now this thing is singing and I'm out and I'm done.
Right. I'm
That's
done.
cool.
Right. Yeah. And then, 5 years later, you're embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
You've moved on,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but I think the truth to painting, and I think that the answer to life is in the pink of a Francis Bacon painting. Like that background, powdery pink, like I saw it at Gagosian on Madison for his late painting show a couple of years ago. And to me, it was just, it was the answer that I had been looking for 2 decades. And I'm sure if you said that to Francis Bacon, he would laugh in your face and call you an idiot. But there was just something about the simple application of that background and that color that I'm sure took him years to get right. And I just felt it all at once. And it was really great. So,
yeah, that's totally. Can you articulate at all, like the feeling of your work? I know it's, not, who knows what the hell it is, but what's the feeling that you're after? And it might just be that it's, I feel this, there's that consistency in your work and that's just you. So maybe this is just the feeling of you, like there's an optimism there. There's a boldness there. There's a internal conversation and a bit of a fastidiousness that I see. Maybe we're just describing you, but like, do you think about it in terms of feeling to keep yourself kind of on track? Or
I think at some point, no matter how you feel about a work or what it is you're trying to convey with your work, especially with abstract painting, I think at some point, like you have to draw a line because people are going to get different things out of it, right? They're going to feel different ways about it. They're going to either see something tangible in it that they can relate to, or they feel something that they can't really explain when they look at it. The thing that I really want to convey with my work is that there was thought put behind it, right? That there was some real effort put behind it, and that it just wasn't just a random placement of colors and line. I want people to at least be able to look at it and say, there's a message in here somewhere. Now, what that message is, like,
yes.
Even I personally am not clear about it. Like,
no, I get it. Yeah.
The thing I like about my paintings and the thing that I want my paintings to do, and I don't know if this is a message or what, but like what I want them to do is I want them to tell their story slowly, right? I want them to unfold over time for people, because I think that slow unfolding ends up creating a deeper relationship between the painting and the viewer, right? It becomes their own conversation with it. Now, I've had my dealings with it already, right? And they were aggressive and probably fraught with disaster and curse words and a little bit of tension between the painting and myself. But what I want the viewer to do is I want the viewer to have their own conversation with it as well. I get so much pleasure out of that relationship between me and my work. I want to transfer that over to strangers, right? I want them to feel connected to the work, even if it's an inexplicable connection where, they can't tell me what they're feeling or what this means to them. I don't really want to know, you know what I'm saying? I want them to have it's like going to church on a Wednesday afternoon, right? There's nobody in there, but you have a relationship with the moment, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm after.
Yeah. So, there's evidence of an inquiry that's serious, that you can't, it's undeniable when you look at the work, you can just feel it. And this is something I try to, help artists with, students and such, like, if you're just really paying attention, it will show. It comes in the work, and there's that inquiry is there, and people can pick up on it, and it will draw people in that are interested in that. And I think that's something you're speaking of.
And you don't always have to. I don't want to be led around by the nose, right? I don't want to be told how to feel about something like a painting, right? Like, that's a very personal experience. And so, I hate to overquote Mark Rothko when he said that sometimes silence is the most appropriate, right? Like, just being, and I think as a society and in America, especially today, with everything traveling as quickly as it does and attention spans being what they are, I feel like we're sort of losing those moments a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Those pauses. Absolutely. Yes.
I
Yes.
think they're so important, man. Like I stand in front of like a really good de Kooning painting, and even if I've seen it a million times, like it still hits you like a bolt of lightning, right? Like it really gets you, and it's that sort of inexplicable nature of that work. That's what I'm really after. I mean, even if it's just for myself, right? And I've had those moments, where I'm like, yeah, I really got that right.
Yeah.
But then
No.
I don't, you don't want to pat yourself on the back so hard you fall over. You know what I mean? So just like you gotta just move on
Right.
and let it be what it is.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. But these are the breadcrumbs we use to kind of keep going for sure.
And what a great history to leave, right? Like I'm not into legacy building. I'm not into like, well, what's my name going to be after I'm dead? But like the great thing about art, and for you and I, it happens to be painting, is that like these are moments that can happen long after we're gone. And
Yeah.
I love that. I love pretending to know something about Willem de Kooning or something about Francis Bacon or Philip. Like I never met Philip Guston. Like he's dead, right? He's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But I feel like I know him in a strange way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we make the same mistakes. Like I've done that myself on a canvas. Do you know what I mean? And like I like that notion of my ghost hanging around some dimly lit gallery somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's something very appealing about it.
Dude, it's just been so inspiring to talk to you. I mean, I just love, I love that this thing that we're making, this art making that, and it's just such a friggin' mystery. But as we're all figuring it out and talking about it, it starts to become just, clearly everyone's doing their own version of this thing, but just really inspiring.
Well, that's the great thing, right? At your core, you are an individual, right? And so nobody's going to do what you're able to do. And so my advice to people is to strip away the insecurity, because it's always going to be there. Use it to motivate yourself, right? Strip away the fear of not having money, or, the fear of never having an exhibition. Become an individual, right? Embrace your individuality and then make something with it. And it will never be replicated. It's a singularity. Nicholas, there's nothing greater on this planet than creating singularities. Things that never repeat. It is a beautiful thing that everybody is capable of doing. It's just a matter of getting over that hill, man. And it could be a hill you climb, for decades, right? But enjoy the process. Enjoy the journey of it. I wouldn't change a thing. The last 20 years of my life, I wouldn't change a thing. They've been hard as hell and satisfying. And what's great is now I have a product that was born out of those 20 years. And they're my children, and I love it.
Dude, thank you so much for this conversation. It's inspiring for me, and this is what I teach. What you just said the last couple of minutes is like a summary of pretty much what I help artists with and myself. So thank you so much.
Well, listen, thank you, Nicholas. I think what you're doing for people is great. I think that you've set up an organization that, again, the feedback that I've heard from people that have been involved with Art2Life has been nothing short of inspirational, and you should be congratulated for that, because not having a community as an artist can be a difficult thing. Like it's obviously easier when you have people that are doing what you're doing, and to be in a collective mindset and helping each other through those things, even though you go home and you're an individual and you paint in your studio by yourself. So I think what you're offering people a platform like that, I think could really help them get over those hard bits of this very worthwhile journey, as far as I'm concerned.
Dude, thank you so much.
Great to see you, man.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Art2Life show. If you enjoyed the podcast, please help me get the word out by sharing it with your friends on Instagram at Art2Life_world. The recording of this and all episodes, along with a place to leave comments, see additional photos, and discover a whole new approach to making art, can be found by going to Art2Lifepodcast.com. And secondly, if you could leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on today, I would super, super appreciate it. It makes a big difference. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my artist list, every Sunday morning I send out a video blog all about art making. Go to Art2Lifepodcast.com to sign up. And all these links are in the show notes, of course. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.